is badly spent. Of course, there are other sources of funds beside the state budget, like local budgets. But I can assure you that every penny from this department is very, very well and precisely accounted for. No church can receive money unless they have complete and clear records.
Do you really think, given Romania's financial crisis, the building of thousands of churches and a new controversial cathedral is the best way of spending state money?
Deci dumneavoastră știți că în 90 noi am ieșit dintr-o...
As you know, in 1990 we came out of a long atheist period, around 50 years. So, the Orthodox Church received support to regain its important role in Romanian society. Even during communism, the number of churches was always too small for the number of believers. The communists took from the church and it lost nearly all its property. Now, the state is trying to compensate for this by giving back a small proportion of what it's taken.
I've driven some 2 hours northeast of Bucharest. It's a Sunday morning and arrived in the village of Reviga, where there's a rebel priest, for want of a better expression, called Casian Pandalica. Along with his father, they've been kicked out of the Orthodox Church and have established their own church with the help of their local parishioners. This is a 4-hour-long Sunday morning service. It's coming to an end now, and people are just filing past me to all eat together in what looks like effectively a sort of church canteen. Casian Pandelica got into trouble with the Orthodox hierarchy when he refused to raise an extra 50,000 euros from his congregation of 800 for renovation work on his church. It led to a standoff with the local bishop. The police were sent in to expel him from the church in a dawn raid. But the parishioners remained loyal to Casian and his father, and now they all worship together in a makeshift chapel. The last 2 years, kicked out of the church, military police arriving, the church closed down. Can you explain to me what it felt like when the police came?
Scared? Just scared. Me, my children, and my wife, and the whole community. To see a lot of policemen here and special forces is not so easy. They want to destroy me, to disappear.
They want you to go away.
Yeah, but I have nowhere to go. This is my home, this is my family, here is everything I have. So, to go where? To do what? To accept that me and my family are bad people, are worst people in the world? I don't think so. It's not possible.
I observed in your service today, your slujba, that at the end you held a very passionate sermon explaining to your parishioners what had happened and how strongly you felt about the way in which the Orthodox Church had behaved. And at the end you mentioned the cathedral for the salvation of the people that's currently being built in Bucharest. What's your objection to that cathedral?
Here we are talking about the symbol of power. Power of Ceausescu, power of Orthodox Church, both closer, one behind other. So we will see the Ceausescu house with cross.
So in other words, your objection is, in Ceausescu's time, the great symbol of power was this dictator's palace, and now there's a new symbol of power, and that's the power of the Orthodox Church. The two symbols side by side.
Exactly. The church is a business. Not just a business, it's a way to wash money for the political class.
To wash money?
To wash money, yeah. Nobody checks in administration of the church what's happening with the money. Nobody knows. A priest have a target to sell a candle, and they must to give the money every month to the bishop. And on the other side, the administration of church never give money in our community. Just take, never give.
But the church says that it does good works in the community, that it does help the community.
I want to see where is that work.
On On another train journey, my destination is northern Moldova, a remote, poor part of Romania, to try to answer Cassian's question. Just how much help does the church give those in need? I first came here when I was 18 to work with the orphans in Siret, after seeing those heart-rending news stories about Romania's state institutions.
Mariana, ce faci,
Marianne is one of the girls who was an orphan. She's now an adult, of course. She still lives in Siret. And the first thing she said to me is, Christ is risen. I said, indeed, it's true. He's risen. This is a girl who I have known for some 20 years. She grew up in this enormous orphanage here in Siret. And now, of course, she's an adult, still lives in care, not able to live independently. One must ask who would be if you were handed over to the state aged 3 weeks old. But a remarkable girl, like a great energy. Pentru tine, Mariana, cât importanță are Dumnezeu în viața ta? I'm asking her, could you just tell me how important God is in your life, Mariana? I can tell you in English that I believe in God, she says. She tells me how she prays in the evening and she talks to God. Și în dimineața și în seara?
Da, bineînțeles.
So do you pray in the morning as well? She goes, yeah, I pray. Of course I pray. Marianne has fallen in love with the fluffy microphone and she's just given it a kiss. I ought to explain that here in Siret, it was the largest orphanage children's hospital during Ceausescu's times, a notorious institution. And in the wake of the revolution, of course, it grabbed the world's attention. Mariana and TV taking us on a tour of both the new hospital which we've been in, but the adult orphans haven't moved into this new hospital yet because to date the funding for the hot water was so long in coming through that it still hasn't been installed. So they remain in the old hospital. How old is the institution we're going to visit now?
69, it was between 1860.
He's just asked me, the first question he's asked me is, when am I going to church? We've come in to the adult institution and immediately attracted a lot of attention. Of course, we're with TV, who's the man who looks after them all. They're devoted to him. My producer's having a hand kissed. One of the blind adults who I remember as a child, in fact, is embracing me. I don't know. And if you look up, you can see it's not what you would expect, given the furore there was over the conditions in which the orphans lived. You would maybe anticipate that now they would live in a modern, shiny, new build. They don't. This is a very, very old building. It effectively looks like a high-security prison. For want of a better expression, there are bars everywhere. Hanging off the bars are the modest clothes drying in the sunshine. And from the courtyard, we're standing down below in the courtyard, everyone, all these young adults, many rocking, are looking down on us and smiling and rocking and waving. Now, one of the arguments of the Orthodox Church currently, in order to justify the considerable state funds they receive, is that they assist in the community. So I've come to see TV Rotaro, who's head of what remains of this institution in Siret, to find out what he makes of this claim from the Orthodox Church that they assist in the community.
I think my experience and the hospital experience with church is a double one. So there is a personal experience, and our young people are going to church almost every Sunday if they want to. It's very important for them, and it's part of their resocializing process. But on the other hand, the actual physical material involvement of church into the hospital, and in general into social services, are practically nil. They don't exist there. They are not really involved into that.
So in other words, you're saying there are two very different areas. One is the spiritual well-being of these young adults.
Yes.
And in terms of that well-being, the church is very instrumental in giving them structure and a belief.
Because you know, church is very important for Romanian people, so it gives them the sense of belonging to this Syrian community. That's very important on one hand.
But on the other hand, one of the biggest issues around the orphan crisis was the conditions in which they lived.
Yes.
Like animals. I mean, I remember it coming here in the early 90s, eating out of buckets, 20, 30 beds in a room, which is a different issue from their spiritual well-being.
In Syrian Orthodox Church, you really nothing for these young people.
Nothing.
No.
We've made several attempts to speak to someone in the church hierarchy, but were told continually that no one was available to meet with us. However,